Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm gonna talk about Lazarus, season 1, episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, the opening situation, before we got to the title card, we kind of had that little pre-title card opening. You kind of hear, I believe, Chris talking about the whole. She always thinks she's also like, why do we have to kind of go through, like, why does life have to be a thing of you have to kind of go through trials and tribulations, like that life is meant to be like this thing, like you have to overcome some stuff just to make it through life. She's like, why can't life just be fun? And then you have something like happen to come along and it just kind of like the definition of that. So she's like, immediately I jumped on it. And it's just kind of interesting because she was like, yeah, people were saying like it was going to be like the cure for a broken heart. But she was like, there is no cure for a broken heart. It is this interesting thing where she had made that. I mean, that is an ironic element of, right. Twofold, really, when it's like, right, the trials and tribulations through life, you thought like there'd be an easy way with this drug happening, and it ends up being like maybe one of the biggest trials and tribulations, depending on who you ask. And then like the whole like, oh, you're dealing with heartbreak, and now you're dealing with even this thing is supposed to be a cure for heartbreak, and Chris was right because there's no cure for heartbreak because this leads to more heartbreak when you're like, cool, I've got a ticking clock of 30 days left. Once again, they specified it was kind of like the first wave of people, but who knows what that means. Like, you probably have a buffer window of some time, for people who took it later on, but we haven't really talked about that because it's like, the people who took it, like that first wave of happening are like super dead in 30 days, and that's a crap ton of people. So, let's prevent like a mass genocide of a whole bunch of people, when it comes to the world's population. So, like I said, it's just interesting. They've never really dived into that conversation of, well, what about anyone who took Hapna kind of at a later point in time, and that mutation hasn't necessarily hit that point in their system yet, but, whatever. But obviously picking up where last episode left off with all those Skinners around the world. I love the last one they show you is this woman on the beach, and like here's Skinner's head like superimposed on it. It's just, and I think it was Leland it was either Leland or Axel that was like, ugh, gross. I think it was Leland. But Elena saying like there's only 3 hackers, herself included, that could be able to do something like that. So they're tracking down the other 2 hackers because it's like, well, Skinner couldn't have done this because he doesn't have the know-how to do it. So most likely he hired one of these 2 hackers to do it, but it also does imply he never got plastic surgery, so he does still look like himself if he's going through all the trouble of having like surveillance systems hacked to kind of perpetuate all these different Skinners all around the world and stuff. So the team then splits up. You have Chris and Leland going to investigate Leland's Skinner's house, and they have to come in pretending to be cleaners. I don't think that was there, like all those like all his house being tagged and spray painted the way it was, like killer, mad scientist, villain, and all this stuff. But he managed to get in because Leland was able to convince the cops, hey, fine, this cancellation fee for this job we were hired to do, there's a crap ton of money, and I can send the invoice to you guys. Which Chris was like, oh, like, what's that all about? Like, how do you know how to do that? He's like, what it is, nothing special. She's like, and he's like, what? Because she was talking about like, right, you're kind of an enigma, like you're hiding stuff about yourself. He's like, what about you? What'd you do before you ended up working for her? And she was like, I traveled around the world as a special agent. And he was like, yeah, sure. Which I'm like, I don't know if she was lying. She might have actually been telling the truth. She might have been like, no, I am an open book. I'll tell you exactly what I did. You just won't believe me. Well, we'll never know. We'll not never know. We'll probably find out way later, but I'm curious if that was her just being like, nah, that was just her really just hiding the past, or that could be her being like, no, that's really what I did. You just won't believe me. It's also interesting because they found, specifically Chris found that pill, and it's like, well, it's not Hapna, but it's like, we don't know what it is. Do you think it's a cure for Hapna? But it's like, oh, come on. There's no way I'm just going to randomly find it on a sofa in his house. But I'm like, we never got clarity on that. She never presented to anybody like, oh, we should run this. We know she kept it on her, but it's going to be significant in some way. But I think that would be poetically ironic if like the cure was somewhere as simple as that. But that I don't think it's going to be the cure, but it might be a piece to the puzzle that Chris didn't think much of. At least we didn't hear anything about it for the rest of the episode, so who knows. Another angle is we have the dynamic duo of Doug and Axel working together. Obviously, the pairing that neither one of them likes this pairing, but it's like, oh, we got to do what we got to do. But Doug had a professor while he was working at a lab, and that professor had ties to Skinner. Tries to find that Professor Claude, but Professor Claude retired apparently and was now apparently living on the street. So Axel takes him to this homeless establishment because he's like, area, because it's like, I know someone who I was in jail with, like, 2 stays ago, as he kind of puts it, named Jerry. And they go there, and they don't find Jerry, they find Jill. It's like, hey, Axel, oh my God, I'm so happy to see you. And it's like, oh, did you do a whole bunch of, why are you here? Did you break out of prison? Like, something kind of like that. And it's like, oh boy, here you are, still the same. But yeah, they asked Jill about Claude. But first, Jill brought up the whole thing of, I'm a transgender person who went through bankruptcy. And it's like, my story isn't that uncommon. There are so many people here who I thought was kind of an interesting perspective on it, where it's like a lot of people here had a tough go at life and, would rather kind of bury the past. But a lot of people here are kind of overjoyed that the world is basically doomed and going to end considering their circumstances. She's like, no one will outwardly say that. So for her, it's like, people wanting to keep their past. I don't want to steer that up. But Doug brings up, like, I owe Claude, because when I was in university, or, a dean told me that there was never going to be a black Einstein, that no matter how hard people like me tried, it would just never happen. He punched a dean, was going to be expelled, but it was actually Claude who stepped in, and he's like, I need to at least tell that guy thank you. So they ultimately help run into him, and we kind of find out a little bit about Claude's story, that he distanced himself from Skinner because Skinner was like he's like, yeah, he was gifted, he was smart, but he was also the obsessive type. He basically had tunnel vision, and everything else fell to the wayside. And it's like, I'm going to stay away from this guy. But in that years they were no longer friends, the guy's career skyrocketed, and Claude was jealous. So he fabricated aspects of his research that the university found out, and he was fired, and he lost everything. And it's like, here I am. It's ironic that I cut this guy out of my life, but my need to like outdo him ended up being my undoing. So, but he brings up, like, the little bit he knows is Skinner would talk about his baklava, and it's like his grandmother would make amazing baklava that no one else could contend with. So it was kind of a nice, jumping off point. I also love Axel challenging that guy to a basketball game, doing the most ridiculous shit, like jumping off the wall. And he's like, yo, that's not fair. Then at one point jumping off the guy's back to make the basket. It's like, yeah, think about that next time you're trying to scam somebody. And he's just like, get out of here and never come back. But Jill's got an interesting perspective on Axel, where she's like, the guy Axel's so comfortable and charismatic that basically anywhere he goes, he can feel like home. But he's still such an enigma that you really don't know much about the guy, that he can just kind of like up and disappear on you one day, try and break out of prison and disappear one day on you. So it's kind of like, you got to keep an eye on that one. The group reconvenes as they try to track down Belinda, because the ties to her, because she was supposed, apparently she was heard about was in Istanbul, but there's one particular place in Istanbul because they can't find any records on her. So it's like, okay, did he go out of his way to hide her, remove all records of her in general? But there's one spot in Istanbul where it's like, yeah, there's no security cameras here, so there's something being hidden here that no one wants being caught. So Leland's there, and Axel gets sent, which I even love. Chris and Doug were having a conversation. Doug's like, wouldn't we be a better fit for this? Why did Hirsch decide to send Leland? And it's like, well, he kind of looks like a grandson, so I guess because he's kind of got that baby face and kind of looks like, oh, he could be someone's grandson, maybe that's going to be a way in. I don't know, maybe it's something about Leland in particular that made her decide. I mean, he literally almost got his arm cut off with an axe, so that was pretty close. But I mean, to be fair, he's the reason why they made it as far as they did, considering finding out Belinda, because he was like, oh my god, we're just here for baklava and Belinda, and they're like, baklava? Oh, Belinda? And they took her took them to her, but not before stuff popped up. Because I love Leland's wear what he's wearing, and Axel's like, "Why are you wearing that?" He's like, "Oh, I thought with all the crime and all around here, I thought it'd be fit in." And I love that Axel's like, "Yeah, sure, yeah, that's totally gonna work." Because you literally look at all these other people walking around, no one's wearing that, so it's like you're making yourself stand out even more. But Axel's like, "Yeah, we need to kind of stand out more anyway because it draws some attention." So running for their lives, trying not to get killed by these guys. Who later on Belinda's like, "Oh, they're good. They might be some ruffians, but they're kind of not too bad." And Leland's like, "Oh, well, yeah, if you say so. Too bad. I'm sorry I had to rough them up a little bit." I was like, "Okay, Leland." But yeah, she talks about her grandson, where it's like she raised him from as a kid because he lost his parents when he was young. And he was just a normal kid to her. Like, no matter all that he did, any success, and all that people know about him, he'll always just be that kind of wimpy, kind-hearted kid that she always knew. And I love Axel being like, "Yeah, we're a special agents," and she's like James Bond. He's like, "Yep." She's like, "Do you have a license to kill?" He's like, "Yep." But yeah, it is the thing of like, yeah, the guy who basically is wiping out the entire world with his drug left a message to his grandmother 3 years ago. Well, so much stuff ties back to 3 years ago. She got a message from him 3 years ago. We saw that global warming situation that he was talking about in front of the UN, that was 3 years ago, and that was like a little before he disappeared. So something popped off 3 years ago. Who knows if I'd assume like all of that was like after he had already made Hapna, so it's like he'd already set that in motion. Maybe some of this was all after he made. Maybe he'd already made Hapna, or maybe it was before he made Hapna. We still don't know the timetable on some of these events, like the UN thing, or even him sending Belinda this message. But it's like, yeah, he didn't seem like the type of guy that's willing to like kill a whole bunch of the world. But Axel's like, right. The guy loved his grandmother enough to send her a message. Obviously, she's his world because she raised him. Like, she's the closest thing to a mother he's known. I mean, that's your grandmother, but still, like, she's more mom than grandma to you. And it's like, there's no way he would ever just leave her on her own. He would have something nearby to keep an eye on her to make sure she's okay. And he finds a camera and he's like, "Yo, are you watching, Skinner? Do you know me? Like, I'm going to find you." But it's not Skinner. It's, what was it? Was it Dog 909 or Doctor 909? It might have been Doctor 909. One of the hackers like fell into a trap that Elena had set up just to see, like, all right, let me keep like kind of put some like floaters out there that kind of basically decoys to kind of like draw you out and kind of grab you immediately the moment you try to make any action. So it's like, cool. And she's like, I'm elated. You see like a look on her face you've never seen before because she's really getting into our hacker bad. And she's like, "Oh yeah, hell yeah." Like, she's kind of activated. And so that's where we kind of end the episode. 26 days left on the calendar. So very interesting developments in that regard. I'm curious to find out more about this hacker, and maybe he can be. I'm sure the entire next episode is going to be about tracking down this hacker. Who knows if he's probably going to have some armed security on him or something like that. It is interesting. I mean, I guess like you have enough power and reach, you're able to. Because I was about to say, like, why would this hacker help out Skinner? Because I'm like, if the rest of the world's looking for him, but it's still the thing of, you could just happen to be the person that never took Hapna, so maybe you're fine. But it could also be a thing of, hey man, I've only got a limited amount of time, I'm getting paid, hey, might as well enjoy my money while I can, that I have some code of honor as a criminal and hacker that, like, I'm not going to betray even though it'd be so easy for you to just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to sell out my client. Maybe we'll kind of reach that road or cross that bridge when the Lazarus squad catches up to this hacker, but we'll see how that all shapes up and plays out. But I'm curious to see, like I said, I guess because you'd assume like someone like him, like reaching out to a hacker, but I guess like when you're desperate enough to kind of disappear. But it could also be, this could be someone else's wild goose chase because maybe it has nothing to do. Well, maybe it's not Skinner who set this all in motion. Maybe someone else did. I don't know. There's a lot that we still don't know. So we'll just have to wait to see as things get explored more in the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.